We talked about some of the infusion opportunities. We talked about some of the testing stuff. I definitely want to be able to have time, Tasia, to answer some questions from our viewers. So if you want to go ahead and help us with that, that would be wonderful. We'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. So Ginger had a question during the discussion, and I'm going to go ahead and let her unmute and ask you.
Sure.
Oh.
Okay. My question. Hi, Dr. B. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing
Nice to
well,
see
thanks.
you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks for joining us.
My question is about inflammation. I know what inflammation looks like if you get a cut or, something gets infected. But how do you know if you have inflammation of the gut or another part of the body that you can't see?
So I will add a couple things in terms of laboratory studies, and then I'm going to have my Dr. Siciliano talk a little bit more about the GI stool testing, because that's where you're going to be able to see some of the best and easiest markers for GI inflammation.
Okay.
But if you're just doing general like blood work kind of thing, we will look at like a complete blood count. We'll look at your white blood cell count. We're going to look at what we call a differential, which is the breakdown of the white blood cells. And sometimes that can tell us if there's an inflammatory process that's in there, whether it be infectious or whether it just be inflammation from something else. We also look at some of the blood tests that we often order, like a C-reactive protein. And that is a non-specific test for inflammation, but very highly sensitive. So often if there's some kind of inflammation in the body, that level will be elevated. It doesn't tell us where, but we can go looking, obviously. And then we ask the patient questions about, what are you experiencing? So like when you and I have our visits and I talk to you and I say, okay, are you having any issues with heartburn? Are you having any issues with abdominal bloat? Are you having any issues with constipation or diarrhea? Are you having joint pain? Are you having headaches? Are you having any urinary symptoms? So these are all things that we ask and look at. And then we look at the metabolic levels, and we look at your comprehensive metabolic profile. Sometimes we can see changes in inflammation by looking at something called the anion gap, which is a test that it's part of a test to look and see what your acidity levels are, as well as looking at your urine. A lot of people don't realize that we can look and see what acidity and what inflammation is going on in your urine, not simply by blood, but things looking like at your pH. Okay, so we want to keep you a little bit more on the basic side, but it's interesting how many patients I have with pHs of 5 and 4, and that's way too acidic. So those are the types of blood tests. But Dr. Siciliano could talk a little bit more about the GI diagnostic test, the stool testing.
Yeah, so in stool testing, one way you can tell if you're inflamed is just looking at the types of bacteria that are in your gut. So you'll have your normal bacteria, you should have your good guys. There's opportunistic bacteria, which should be in your gut, but maybe to not any great extent. And they could be pathogenic bacteria. So if you got a lot of pathogenic bacteria, we know your gut's inflamed because you got some pathogens in there. If you got a lot of opportunistic bacteria where they've grown too much, that's not good. That means that the good guys are probably too low. On the other side of the coin, we can look at certain inflammatory markers. So there's something called calprotectin. If that's high, you're probably inflamed. If you have secretory IgA being too high, we know some type of inflammatory process going on. Secretory IgA is secreted within mucosal membranes in the gut. And when your gut gets inflamed, the body will respond. It's an immunological response. So secretory IgA will start to creep up. There's another marker that we like to do called zonulin. And if zonulin levels are high, then we know that basically you have increased gut permeability, or the slang is leaky gut syndrome. It's definitely going to be there.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
So that's how we go hunting for it. So in conjunction with conventional testing, when we do the stool test, we look for these different markers, and it can hone us into how to fix up the gut. And I used to tell people, when I want to fix the gut, I bring down to 3 R's. We're going to remove the bad guys. R for remove, repair, and then replace. Let's remove the bad guys out of your system. Sometimes we need to give herbal antimicrobial herbals. Sometimes we give things like butyrate or short chain fatty acids, things to help with increasing fiber in the diet sometimes.
Mhm.
And then we may give you things like L-glutamine to help with gut healing.
Mhm.
And then perhaps some good probiotics to help re-inoculate your gut. So it's a process, and that's how we do it. But it starts off with looking at conventional testing and looking
Okay.
at what we call a comprehensive stool diagnostic analysis, or simply a stool test.
And then
Very
being able
good.
to do elimination in order to see what is inflaming you. So this is all part of that elimination process to try to really hone in on what is causing the inflammation in your body. Make
Thank you.
sense?
Yep. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Ginger. That was an excellent question. Okay, next up, Julie had a question, but she's on vacation and it's really loud in the background. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the question for her. And as a reminder, if anyone else has any questions, find that reactions button down in your menu bar and you'll be able to raise your hand there so we can call on you next. All right, Julie would like to know if there are any diets that are made according to a person's specific DNA.
Okay.
There's blood type diets. I know they're out there.
Yeah.
I never really, utilized them, put them
No.
to the table.
I've never had any luck with them, so.
We can look at maybe things that certain people have certain methylation problems, say with COMT, or the MTHFR gene. If they
Yeah,
have some
that's
type
true.
of
Yeah.
genetic problems
Yeah,
there,
mutation, right?
then with the mutations there, then certainly you may benefit by having more methylated Bs in the diet.
Yeah, oh yeah, methylation. And again, that would also help with the infusion
Absolutely.
piece of it as well. Because usually if there's a genetic deficiency, then we need to fortify, which may have to bypass the gut, where it can actually be, really bioavailable. No,
Okay.
that answers it completely.
Okay, Tasia.
Awesome. That was a really interesting question. Next up, we have Brenda. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Feel free to hop on and ask your question.
From this morning, I just wondered if you found out anything about the crystal water.
Oh, I didn't have a chance to look into that, but I will do that. I have that on my desk pad. Have you guys heard about crystal water?
Oh,
I have
where they
not.
put the crystals in the water?
In
I
the
think so.
Is that what it
Yeah.
is?
in
Brenda?
the in the container. You buy the container and it has the crystals in it.
Crystals in it. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
seen that at spas and such, where each crystal brings the
Yes.
energy of something to fortify the water.
Right.
I'll be honest with you, I have never seen any conclusive studies on it. Do I think it's going to hurt? Probably not, but I honestly have never seen a study on it to show, is it, actually infusing into the water? Does that reverberation of the
They're doing
frequency
a
of the
good job
crystal?
with advertising, I can tell you that.
Yes, they are. 'Cause
I'll
they're-
have to look into that one for you, Brenda, I
Yeah.
promise.
Yeah, we're all curious.
I think in general, the water that seems to be the best out there is Fiji water, unless you guys think differently. But I know Fiji water is always touted as being one of the better waters that people want to pick the water out there. So,
I would say people are very particular about the taste of their water.
Yeah.
Sure.
People have their specific brands that they like, and that's when they'll drink more of. And I'm all, have at it.
Well, here's a good question. So I have a lot of people who say to me, well, I'm not a big water fan. So what else can I drink? Or does carbonated water count? So, okay, it's all you.
Well, with what is it, 75% of the American population is dehydrated, and we know that that affects our cognitive function and
Mhm.
a whole host of other things.
Every process.
Every process, yeah, our cells, every cell needs it in order to survive. And so my standard statement is drink and eat fluids, or eat foods that have a high fluid content, because there's a ton of them out there, your fruits, your
And your
vegetables. So you can't go wrong with that. And sort of to speak a little bit about what you said, sometimes it takes a little bit of a period of time, like 2 weeks, right? 3 weeks to make that for your taste buds to make that transition. And so it may be off-putting at first, but you know, people who drink water, I say, put fruit in there, put some mint leaves in there, put some, you know, you can put all kinds of things in there to help sort of offset that plain taste, if you will. And for some people, it's drinking it at room temperature versus
Correct.
drinking it ice cold. And so the temperature makes a difference. But for
Or the
me,
brand,
Mhm.
or the brand of the water.
Yeah, true. Yeah, the mineral
Yeah.
taste or not having a mineral
Correct.
taste. I just say drink. As long as it's not something that's full of sugar, I think we're off to a good start. And then we make those small little changes
Yes.
that kind of get you where you need to go.
Yeah. Drinking
Okay.
calories is dangerous.
Yes.
And we always taught to drink about half your weight in ounces, right? And that's something they were touting, which is pretty
Mhm.
difficult to do. Again, if somebody's got a history of hyponatremia, I'd be careful with
That's
that.
different.
Right.
Right.
But that seems to be a good way to go, and it does help promote weight loss. And again, all your cells need to be hydrated.
Christy
Absolutely.
can help you with that. She can give you a
She
leader.
can give you
That's
infusions.
true.
Leader, no
That's
problem.
true. You just gotta maintain it after you walk out.
All right, Tasia, anybody else have a question?
Lost my unmute button for a second there.
Mhm.
It doesn't look like we have any other questions from the live attendees. I don't know if the team wants to double check to see if there's anything from our pre-submitted questions that we didn't address in the panel discussion. And while the team reviews that really quick, I just wanted to pop in and let everyone know at the end of the webinar, we're going to go ahead and send a feedback survey. We would really appreciate a little bit of feedback on the web and to see if you like the roundtable discussion style webinar and see if you have any other feedback for us so we can make the next one even better. And as a reminder to everyone, we also want to let you know that you have the ability to schedule one-on-one consultations with the nutritionist if you have very specific needs that you want to address. So I'll let the Burick team talk a little bit more about that, but just wanted to give that little reminder.
Thank you.
All right, I'll hand it back over to the team.
One of the
Address the
questions,
questions.
one of the questions that was submitted prior to coming on live was, and it came up a couple times, is cooking for the family.
Mhm.
And we did talk a little bit about that, about trying to make it a family experience. And this comes up a lot, even I'm sure with Jamie as well with clients. And, you know, everybody has a different need and, you know, we have picky eaters and, you know, different ages. And one of the recommendations I always have is, you know, coming together as a family and maybe making a decision to do one change, you know, whether it be we're going to have a vegetable, you know, with every meal, or, you know, we're going to have a green vegetable on Mondays and we're going to have an orange vegetable on Tuesdays. Something that's not so rearranging your entire life and upheavaling everything you've ever done, but just having one or two, you know, maybe just one a week of a change that would be helpful for the entire family. Everybody can use some more vegetables and more fiber in their diet. You know, maybe it's a little less processed food, but still finding frozen vegetables that are still nutritious and healthy, just maybe not with the cheese sauce, you know, or the extra additives. You know, even, you know, preparing some things together as a family, which eliminates some of the processed foods and ingredients into our diet. And this is a lovely time of year because you can cook out on the grill. You know, it's easy, you know, to try grilled vegetables. It doesn't require a lot of prep. You buy pre-sliced carrots, toss them in some olive oil, put them on the grill. There you go. Simple, easy, not
nice.
processed, and the whole family's involved. But I think a lot of it is not trying to change everything about, you know, what you're eating, and then everybody's unhappy. And then, you know, you're frustrated because you made this meal and you just bought all these, you know, ingredients and nobody's happy. And that's where people tend to fall off and get very frustrated.
Yeah, but I think also when you start eating healthier, with time, taste buds will change, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So people will start to appreciate the taste of colorful fruits and vegetables. They say, well, eat the colors, right? Eat the colors when you go to the supermarket, pick out colorful stuff. And when you start eating more healthy, even though it may not be super sweet, and maybe not be super heavy in fats, the cleaner the food it is, it's going to change your taste buds with time, and then you'll have an appreciation for it. And also the way you do prepare it.
Absolutely.
So again, maybe, cleaner herbs, cleaner, methods of cooking with, say, with certain good oils and whatnot.
And,
Makes a big difference.
Squash is always my example. A lot of people say, I don't like squash, I don't like zucchini. Well, are you putting it in the microwave and steaming it so that it's a mushy mess?
Yeah.
Or are you grilling it or roasting it where you actually have some flavor and texture?
Yeah.
So it might be just changing it up, or grilling, this time of year, it's a perfect time of year to experiment with produce. But people eliminate things universally because they had canned asparagus once, and their mother bought it and now they hate asparagus. Well, it's not great.
And consistency too, just like you mentioned, some kids don't like that mushy, that texture isn't good for them, and they want
Absolutely.
crunchy, and maybe someone else likes it mushy. And so
Yes.
finding that balance. But I also think too, involving the kids
Absolutely.
and the family members. And so each night you have like, what do you want for dinner?
Mhm.
And that kind of gives them a stake in that meal.
Absolutely.
I
Get some
think
buy-in.
is right, exactly. Yeah.
Great. What else came up? Another question was the low carb that came up again several times.
I think my stance on it, and I think we both have sort of similar views, is that there is really no food that is taboo. And the idea is really to have a palate that is full of as many foods as possible, because that's where you get your vitamins and your minerals. I think the focus more is on choosing the healthier versions, and steel cut oatmeal is amazing. I would never cut it out, and pizza's delicious too. And so I would never cut that out either. But it is, I really focus on the 90-10 rule. And if anybody's been my client, they know that 90% of the time we should be focused and on point, and the other 10% we should be human. And if I think you follow that rule, that 10% really shouldn't cause you much of an issue. So
Yeah, people keep saying, low carb. And a lot of the low carb movement is moving away from processed carbs,
Right.
which is a big part of our diet, which is, cheap breads. There's always a place in, my world for, some artisanal breads, but the white bread that, you get from the grocery store or the drive-in, it's the baked goods, the pastries, the cookies. When we're saying, this low carb movement, we're not saying, move away from broccoli, which is a carb food. We're saying move away from the processed things. So again, when people are saying low carb, it really means a very different thing to a lot of different people.
Right.
And it really depends on where you're coming from. There's wonderful grains out there, ancient grains that are beneficial, provide nutrition and minerals and vitamins and fiber. But,
As long as they're not bleached, right?
that's not bleached. Yes, it hasn't been processed and stripped of all of its.
There's no
fiber.
vitamin E in certain white breads. They take it all out.
Yeah, they strip it away.
And then they throw bromide in it, which gives it good shelf life.
Right.
It can mess up with your thyroid
Yep,
because
there
it
goes your
blocks
thyroid.
iodide, which should be good.
Absolutely.
For you. Okay.
that's why you
Absolutely.
see a lot of, I've had patients before who live here and can't eat gluten, the bread or dairy here, and they go over to France and they're like, I could eat the baguette and the brie all day and I was fine. It speaks a lot to our food system
Pasta.
here.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're actually over already,
Sorry.
but
Sorry.
we really wanted to be able to address some of these questions